Welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm Sophie Howe, I'm CEO of Comtec, and I'll be taking you through today's session. Our webinar will focus on how AI can help you create multilingual content and introduce you to our new tool, Clara. So joining me today are Mark Jones, our Head of Technology, and Jourik Ciesielski from CJ International. Both have been the driving force behind Clara. So, gentlemen, would you like to perhaps say a few words of introduction? So, Mark, whether you'd like to go first?
Yep, oh, absolutely. Hi, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Mark Jones. I'm head of technology at Comtec. Been here 8 years, and I'm responsible for everything we do technology-wise, operationally, in the delivery of our service. Everything from new technologies, research and development, and then how we implement them across the team.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark. Jourik.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Sophie and Mark, for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Jourik Ciesielski. I'm wearing a couple of hats in the language services industry. I'm the CTO for an amazing company based in Belgium. And I'm also the co-founder and the CEO of my own company, CJ International. And under the umbrella of my own company, I provide 3 big services: language, technology consulting, engineering and development, and market research. It's under the umbrella of my own company that I have the honor of working with Comtec, which has been a pleasure so far. And I'm pretty excited about today's webinar, where we'll be talking about Clara.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jourik. So let's get started. So I'll set the scene to put Clara in context and share a bit of information about how she works. I'm then going to hand over to Mark, who will do a short demo of the tool, and then we'll come back to Jourik to talk tech, all the tech behind Clara. Dan Jacob is also with us. He's our head of delivery, and he's here coordinating the Q&A. So please do share your questions, and we'll come to those in the last part of the session. So let's get started and set the scene, really, to look at the rapid rise of globalization. So there are lots of ways to measure globalization, from the movement of people to the split of companies who operate internationally versus domestically. But if we look at it just in terms of money made through international trade, and that money is a percentage of all the money made, it's clear to see that globalization really isn't going anywhere. According to the World Bank, world trade accounted for 66% of GDP in 2022, and this figure is still rising. And as you can see from the graph, apart from a little dip for COVID, it's growing more quickly than ever. So that kind of sets the scene in terms of the rise of globalization. But let's move on and look at, with this increase in globalization, we've also seen a big increase in the amount of content produced. We're creating content now at an amazing speed. So, I mean, the amount of data generated annually has grown year on year since 2010, increasing by 74 times in that time, and is expected to increase by over 150% in 2025. They do say that it's estimated that 90% of the world's data has been generated in the last 2 years alone. So we've got this increase in globalization and this huge increase in the amount of content produced, but we still see that most of the internet is not localized. 55% of the content on the internet is in English, yet only 5% of the world speaks English as their mother tongue. And engaging with content in your mother tongue is what makes all the difference. There's a wealth of research to show that the impact on localization in winning business and building brands globally, particularly from the Common Sense Advisory. Their research showed that 76% of online shoppers prefer to buy products with information in their native language, and 40% of shoppers will never buy from websites in any other language other than their mother tongue. So with all this content staying in English, we're really missing a trick. These statistics highlight the value of localization to meet customer needs, and the value of localization really to make the most of the huge opportunities presented by globalization. So moving on, where do we stand? Where do we stand in all this? So our mission as a business is to create localized content for anyone, anywhere. We want to make localization accessible and effective for everyone, helping our clients to deliver content in their customers, consumers, clients' own language. Our aim in the context of Clara and technology is to leverage that technology as much as we possibly can to support the localization, while combining this with the deep linguistic expertise and in-depth understanding of these tools and how they work, what they can and what they cannot do as well. So with all of that in mind, meet Clara. So what is Clara? So Clara is effectively your AI multilingual copywriter. It leverages OpenAI's GPT-4o as the large language model. It creates content directly in other languages. So it's not working from English copy, but it's working from a prompt. It works really well with short form content, which includes blogs, landing pages, social media posts, LinkedIn articles, emails. It works best with higher resource languages, so European and some Asian languages. So what do we mean by higher resource languages? So these are the languages that have a lot of data available online to train the AI model. So data sources such as websites, books, and social media. Clara follows your brand tone of voice by referencing your style guides and glossaries, and we'll talk more about that later on. It focuses very much on human in the loop as its approach, so the content is validated by our global network of expert linguists, and that validation involves checking against the prompt, the reference material, and proofreading for fluency. So that's kind of just an overview and introduction to Clara. Moving on then, so where does a tool like Clara sit versus other methods of localization? What you can see here is the range of localization solutions that we offer to fit client needs and the type of content to be localized. You can see that there are solutions ranging from fully AI to fully human-led solutions. And Clara sits in the AI hybrid part of this kind of spectrum, so to speak. It uses AI, but it combines that with the expertise of our linguists. The human checking piece is very important to us. We strongly believe in the need for human input, even with the huge advancements that we're seeing in technology. Clara differs from machine translation, as it generates content directly in other languages, whereas machine translation works from existing source content, which is then translated into another language. What our aim really is to support you in selecting the right approach. So looking at these different services and selecting the right one depending on your content and your overall business objectives. These tools are very sophisticated, but they do have limitations. And what we're doing continually is testing to understand their capabilities, understand their limitations, understand how to get the best out of these tools. And then understanding what's the right one to meet our clients' needs. So, when would you go for a tool like Clara versus a human-led approach? There are some key questions to ask here in trying to work out whether Clara is the right fit. So, for example, questions that we would be working with you to answer is, what type of marketing content do you need translating? What's the level of accuracy and quality that you need? Is it low risk, so to speak, where it's less critical for it to be perfect? Or is it high profile, high risk content, highly creative, designed to be compelling and to really evoke emotion? What is the volume of content that you need to create? What's the length of each asset? So do you need shorter pieces of content, or are you looking for longer form content? Which markets are you targeting, and which languages do you need, and do they work well with AI? What are your turnaround times? What speed are you looking for? Also, an important question is, your internal resource to review, who do you have internally within your team to review content, and how much time do they have, and how involved do you want them to be in the review and in the content generation process. And then, of course, very important question is the budget. What is your budget? So you can see there are quite a lot of questions to consider, and we want to take the time with you to really understand, your responses to those questions. But let's briefly compare AI generated and human written content against some key criteria, just to help to understand where this all fits. So if we look first of all at efficiency, Clara can significantly speed up the content creation process. It takes out that copywriting stage, so it can generate those assets quickly. In contrast to the human-led approach, which is slower, it's going to involve the copywriting of the original source content, the review of that English copy, finalization of that, and then the translation and the review and finalization of that. If we look at cost effectiveness, Clara is potentially a more cost-effective solution. Its typical cost savings can be around 50% when you factor in copywriting costs as well. Then looking at personalization, with AI, there is some customization with specific terminology and style guides, as you'll see shortly when we talk about the onboarding phase, but there are limitations. So with a human-led approach, there's going to be a much higher degree of personalization where the linguist can really adapt the content to fit the tone and style for the specific audience. And then closely linked to that is looking at creativity and the level of creativity with AI. It doesn't have the same level of creativity as the fully human-led approach. That's where you'll see the maximum level of creativity and the maximum capability to adapt fully to kind of local cultural requirements, cultural norms, and so on. Accuracy and quality is obviously in some cases incredibly important, and with AI, there is of course the risk of errors in language and incorrect facts. I'm sure we've heard a lot in the press around hallucinations and where the models will provide information that on the face of it seems correct, but it's factually incorrect. With a human-led approach, our linguists will of course the accuracy and quality is at an optimum level. Finally, with scalability, with Clara, you can scale across multiple languages, but it is limited to the languages that fit for AI, whereas with a human-led approach, it covers all languages. We cover over 200 languages through our network, global network of linguists. So that kind of summarizes a kind of broad comparison between Clara and a fully human-led approach. What I'd now like to go on to is looking at the key steps in using Clara and how it all works, and then Mark will take us through a demo. So I talked about the reference material and how important that is in training Clara. So that's all part of the setup. So the key for Clara is the reference material. Part of the setup is about working with you to collate the reference material and build those resources for each language. So this would include glossaries, style guides, existing content in the target language, such as product descriptions, brochures, release notes, and company information. As part of the setup, we would also onboard a team of linguists. So if you're going to be using Clara on a regular basis, we would look to onboard a team of linguists that would really get to know your brand, your style, your tone of voice, and they would be validating and reviewing that content on a regular basis. once we've completed the onboarding, we then get into the ongoing process. So if you are if this is an ongoing kind of monthly requirement, once we've done the onboarding, there is then we would then be receiving ongoing requests from you. From those requests, we would then create the prompt and use all the reference material that we've established, and then use any specific reference material you might have provided when you made that request. The linguist, once we've generated that content, the linguist then validates it. So, and the linguist is reviewing that content for accuracy, fluency, brand fit. They're reviewing that against the prompt and against all the reference material that has been provided. And then we would be sending that through to you. We'd always recommend that the content is reviewed by you internally and signed off before it's published. And once you've reviewed and you've finalized the content, we'd ask for the final versions back, because that is then saved in our kind of in the document repository dedicated for you, which we would then use to continue as input for Clara for ongoing projects. So that kind of summarizes the overall process. Just finally, before I hand over to Mark, the final bit of information to share with you is obviously how this works regarding kind of pricing and ongoing use of Clara. So there is the option to use Clara for one-off projects. You may be launching a new product, a new service into a new market, and you have a large volume of marketing content or asset that you'd like to produce to support that launch, and that would then work very well as a one-off project. We also have the option to have an ongoing subscription, and those rates and sort of the subscription levels will vary depending on how many languages and how many assets you're looking to produce on a monthly basis. For the one-off projects, which I mentioned, it works really well for those large volume projects because of the investment that you'd be making in the kind of setting up of Clara and collating all the necessary reference material. If sort of once just a kind of there's a few final points to make here. There's flexibility with the subscription that in terms of changing it. So you may want to add in another language. You may suddenly want to increase the amount of assets you're producing. So there's complete flexibility in terms of what level that you choose. The final point to make here is that once you've gone through the onboarding and you've got started with it, you may find that this doesn't meet the requirements in terms of quality and style and so on, in which case we would work with you to get your feedback, and then if this is not the right solution, then we'd allocate a percentage of the onboarding, 50% of the onboarding cost that you've invested. We would then allocate that in an alternative service. So and also the onboarding work that we would have done for Clara would still be highly critical and integral to making sure that we understand the tone of voice. So that would then be invaluable if we were to choose a different approach, such as copywriting or transcreation, for example. So that's enough for me. I'm now going to hand over to Mark to show us a demo of Clara.
Brilliant. Okay, let me just make sure that she is running correctly. Just give me a minute, just while I get this set up again. The joys of doing a live demo. This is right. So here we go. So we are ready to go. So I'm just gonna share my screen. And you should, everybody should now be able to see Clara and the interface that you should see. So thanks, Sophie. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. So I'm going to show you broadly what Clara can do and how it works. And we're going to cover a few topics in the demo. But before I show you how we generate the content, I'm sure everybody is familiar with this type of user interface. If you've used any of the large language models, ChatGPTs of this world, then I'm sure you will know what this looks like and how this is kind of gonna work. Before we dive into the demo and we talk about actually the content generation part, there's a couple of things that we kind of want to show, talk about and discuss, but before we generate the content. The first thing is the thing that we think distinguishes Clara from the rest of the tools, from your ChatGPTs of this world, and that is that Clara leverages what's called a RAG model. So it uses retrieval augmented generation technology to retrieve context, your reference material, and that allows us to be able to upload glossaries, style guides, offline documents through this little file upload system. You can see it here in the user interface, and reference your data to be leveraged during the content generation process. So during that setup process, we'll work together to build all of the reference material and craft everything we need to tailor your output and get the key information from the reference model. What it allows us to also do is to give give Clara a source of truth. The reference model, the reference material that we give it, becomes the source of truth, allows us to then to reduce the risk of hallucinations, and also over time through the work that we do together, as the data matures, as we add more data to the repository, more data to the reference material, we can then improve and refine and further tailor the output as we go. This is obviously a key part of Clara and what we're trying to achieve with her, which is being able to give you more tailored output from the content that you may already have available to you. The second element is also one of the other key parameters around large language models that we are able to have control over, and that is temperature. So temperature, when it comes to large language models, is the parameter which regulates randomness or creativity of the output. It's measured between 0 and 1, and obviously the lower the number, the more focused the output will be, and the higher the number, it will give you a more diverse, more creative output. There are obviously some challenges around that, because with a higher number, there is obviously a risk of more hallucinations, more nonsensical content, where it becomes more creative with the output. Whereas a much lower number, obviously, there are some challenges where it may lack creativity, and it might also feel a little bit robotic and AI generated, which is obviously what we want to try and avoid. So this is a key part of the setup process, the testing process. We can test the content with different prompts, different temperature values, to see where we're getting the best results. For the purposes of the demo, we've gone with a figure of 0.7, which is fairly middle ground in terms of the temperature output. The last part, then broken down into kind of two parts, is the prompting. Obviously, prompt engineering has become a key part of interaction with large language models, and this is broken down into two parts. The first part is a system prompt. So the system prompt is one of the key parameters that we pass to the large language model, and it defines the persona and the role of the large language model. That's a static prompt that is used then to define how Clara will interact with the tasks that you give it, and it allows the system to then distill down the information and the tasks that you're giving it, and then provide it in a certain context. So in Clara's case, we've defined her role as a multilingual copywriter, creating multilingual content, which is fact-based, based on the context provided, and we give it some high-level tone of voice guidelines in terms of what we want to achieve in terms of the output. The second part, and that's where we're gonna show you now, is the user prompt. The user prompt is the task-based prompt that essentially we craft to actually then complete a required task. And I'm going to show you that in a minute, which we'll then use to actually generate and ask the system to actually do a task. In this case, we'll be creating an article. So I'm going to grab a prompt that I've pre-written, and I will talk you through it. So I'm just going to pop this in here. There's some key elements to this that we want to get across, and that is the task and some style and tone of voice guidelines that we're passing in the prompt itself. So the task that we're asking Clara to do is to create an article in French for Comtec, which outlines the business case for localization and the use of language services. We've asked her to basically say, we want to focus on the advantages of creating multilingual content and where that sits in with the return on investment on doing that process. We've also then passed some specific guidelines within the prompt in terms of using the formal style of address, using gender inclusive language, which is a key part of the work that we're doing, and then some specific instructions in terms of adding non-breaking spaces and content which is specific to the target language in linguistically for creating a French content. At the end, we've also given it some other key information. So in the introduction, we'd like Clara to reference Comtec's expertise, and that information we've passed into the reference model. So we've given the reference model some information to be able to show that. We'd like the article to have a title, and in the call to action, we'd also like for there to be a link to contact us. So if you want to get more information or anything like that, contact us with a link to our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that prompt now, and that will just take a little minute to run. A lot of these style instructions we're passing in the prompt for the purposes of the demo, but we can also pass them in a style guide as well. So we can work together to write a really detailed style guide, which we can also pass to the reference model, which would mean that we wouldn't have to pass it in the prompt as well. But just for the use of this, just to highlight the instructions, and we'll see those in a minute when the content returns. So here we go then. So we have our content, and Clara's done a pretty good job. So we have our title, and in our introduction, you can see that the introduction references Comtec's expertise. Over 30 years, nearly over 40 years now, of expertise, and we have that in the content. You'll also see in the main body of the content there it references a study by the Common Sense Advisory, and that is information that I've passed in some articles and reference material that we've passed to the RAG model prior to the demo. So that's actually offline data that we've passed to the reference model, and it's referenced it here. And in the prompt, we asked Clara to give us examples specifically from our context. At the end, then you can also see we've got our call to action. We've got our link to our contact us page. We've also using gender inclusive language. And if you remember in the prompt, we asked it to use the midpoint reference, which you can see here, to distinguish all of the gendered constructions. And we also asked her to provide additional reading. So this is additional reading. If you want to learn more about going and refining the article that you've created, adding additional content, or just learning a little bit more around that sort of idea of the business case for localization. It's taken some references from the large language model for additional references that you can do. You will also see that it uses the formal style of address as we also requested in the prompt. This is an article, blog type content, but Clara can also do, and large language models more generally can also do other content. And this idea of short form content is also a really good one. So if I give her another prompt, so I'm just going to give her another prompt right now, and this prompt is slightly different to the one that we've just created, and this is focused on creating a social media post specifically for LinkedIn. We have some of the same style and tone of voice instructions that we passed in the original prompt, the formal style of address, the gender inclusive language, the language specific instructions. But we've also then asked for a couple of specific things for LinkedIn, and that is the use of language specific emojis. So you can choose to include or not include emojis. In this case, we've chosen to include them, and also to use context-specific hashtags like you see on LinkedIn all the time in lowercase to also help with the indexing of the article. So we're going to run that one now as well, and we'll just wait for that to come back. And there we go. So we have all of the key elements again from that we passed in the prompt. So we have our use of a gender inclusive language, we have the formal style of address, we have our emojis, and we have our contact us with a link to the website, and our hashtags that we asked Clara to provide in the prompt as well. So as you can see, you can tailor this pretty much to as you want it to be and refine the output that you've got, and that's where we kind of work together with you guys to work out what the types of content, the different parameters that you want to achieve in the content. The version you can see is V1. We're already actively working on version 2, and version 2 will be ready in the next month or so, and that will include some additional features, including chat history and management of the repositories. So that will also then take Clara to the next level and further refine what we're trying to achieve.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. So that was an excellent sort of introduction to Clara and how it works in practice. I'd now like to ask Jourik, if that's okay. I'd like to ask you some questions just to kind of let's look at a bit of the tech, and then we'll also leave some time for some of the questions that anyone's asked in the Q&A as well. So Jourik, tell us what's happening in the technology market. What are other companies doing like this?
So first of all, what I want to say is when we think of AI, the usage of AI in the language services industry, we quite spontaneously think of using it for automated translation, machine translation. Makes sense, and I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to eventually replace machine translation as the default technology. But I do want to emphasize here that this does not mean that it will replace the human in the loop. It will just make machine translation a little bit better, 20%, 25%, that's it. Everyone knows that this is happening, AI for translation, that's check mark. What a lot of people might not be aware of is the fact that there is a very big market for AI-driven copywriting, AI-driven multilingual copywriting. And the best piece of evidence I can give here is the fact that pure translation technology providers are actually embarking on releasing and developing all kinds of AI copywriting features. Couple of examples, DeepL, the leader in neural machine translation, they have an AI writing assistant. SmartCat, one of the top 10 TMS players, they have an AI multilingual copywriting feature as well. There's Lilt, a very big US-based language service provider, finance-fueled own technology. They have a similar solution as Clara. And perhaps the best example I can give you is Writer, a company based in the US, in San Francisco. They used to be a TMS called Cordoba. They repurposed, they rebranded into Writer Inc., and they actually raised more than $100 million, a big bag of money to roll out an AI, Gen AI enterprise scale platform centered around multilingual content generation. Those are facts and figures. When I look at the market, when I look at the demand and the requirements, I do sense a little bit of interest when it comes to multilingual copywriting, but it's still interest. I think it's too early to talk about a trend or even a paradigm shift. So that's what's happening in the market.
I'll just add to that, actually. I mean, I've attended SlaterCon, the sort of localization industry conference, I think about 6 weeks ago, and they did a survey with around 1,000, I think 1,000 localization buyers, and it showed that, you know, from the feedback they got, that sort of, I think around 40% of those localization buyers were looking for this type of kind of sort of AI content generation. So it's there, as you said, there's definitely interest there. So can I ask you about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, as Mark mentioned in his demo? Tell us what is this? Tell us how this makes Clara special.
RAG is definitely the differentiator within Clara. This is what makes Clara special, and I want to explain what it is, but it's going to be a little bit technical, so I apologize for that already, but let's give it a try. So in order to understand what RAG exactly is, we need to know what a neural network does. And what a neural network does is the following. It looks at an input, which is typically a text string in our case, and it converts every word in the input into a number, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, etc., and so on. And then it analyzes the relationships and the dependencies between the different numbers in the input. When we talk about a deep learning neural network, which is the case of ChatGPT and all the GPT models, it's really capable of understanding the finest relationship between the different elements in the input, even when we're talking about a 5,000 word input. You know, a large language model will really understand the finest relationship between the very first word in input and the very last word in input. That's the analysis. Then it will produce an output by continuously predicting the next best word in the output, which is why ChatGPT always produces an output word per word, basically. And it does that based on the training data it has digested. That's a neural network. Now, what's RAG? We have deployed RAG, and we've basically deployed a second neural network, and we're exclusively using that neural network to turn our reference data, our context, our documents into those numbers. And we call those numbers vectors. So we're actually creating our very own vector space. And whenever we prompt Clara to do something, to produce a piece of content for us, it will only look at the dedicated vector space as the only source of truth, as the only source of information, which brings a couple of very interesting assets. First of all, the output will be factually accurate. It will reduce the chance of hallucinations a lot. Second, if you want to trick Clara into a wrong answer, which is very easy to do in ChatGPT, she will say, sorry, I cannot do this. This is not correct. This is not appropriate in accordance with the context. It will even correct you if you make something or if you make something that doesn't make any sense at all. Number three, it's multilingual, meaning that if you upload a piece of reference material in, let's say, Romanian, and you ask Clara to produce something in Turkish, it will take the Romanian reference material into account. So that's RAG, and that is the true added value of Clara.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Jourik. I think that was a very accessible overview of RAG. So tell us, why is Clara better than ChatGPT?
Well, we shouldn't even be comparing Clara to ChatGPT. And I will explain what ChatGPT is, because I know that a lot of people don't really know what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is basically a user interface that has been put on top of a large language model. It was released by OpenAI to give everybody on this planet the opportunity to experiment with large language models. It's a teaser, nothing more, nothing less. It's not scalable. It's not very customizable. It's not ready to carry the weight of big enterprise localization or content creation, content management operations. Clara, on the other hand, as Mark mentioned, it's a V1. It's an early thing, but Clara is extremely scalable and extremely customizable. We can adapt Clara in accordance with the needs and the wishes of the Clara users. We can and will adapt Clara in accordance with the market trends. Right now, we're using, for example, GPT-4o. We have the liberty and the freedom to experiment with other models. We have the liberty and the freedom to experiment with multi-model capabilities, for example, integrating speech and images and whatnot. So that's the big difference. The LLM space is a very moving thing. A lot is happening in the LLM space, and Clara will follow the evolution and grow along.
Brilliant. Well, I just have one final question, then we'll move to the Q&A. Is I think something that you know we all sort of all consider is around security. Why is Clara safe?
There are two angles to Clara. First of all, we call GPT-4o using the API, and then we have the RAG model, which has been discussed extensively already. So let's start with using GPT-4o using the API. Whenever you consume a service using an API, the service provider or the technology provider guarantees that the data that's being processed through the API is not used to train models internally or for any other internal purposes at OpenAI in this case. That's argument number one. Argument number two is that whenever we transfer data using the API, it is encrypted in accordance with the well-established encryption protocol, TLS 1.2. Data encryption basically means that the data is locked, meaning that if it is intercepted, edge case by a third party, the third party will not be able to read or do anything with the data. The rule of thumb when using this kind of technology, this kind of service is, if you make use of a paid service, your data is safe. If you make use of a free service, which we're obviously not doing, then you pay with your data. The RAG model, on the other hand, that's a lot simpler. The reference material, the documentation, the data is stored on the Comtec premises, so it's never leaving the Comtec premises, and it doesn't get any safer than that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, well, I think that's kind of covers some of the kind of key questions that I thought would sort of be good to get that understanding of the sort of technology behind Clara. So for the last sort of 5 minutes, we were going to look at see if we had any questions in the Q&A. Dan, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, we've had some really good questions come in throughout the session. Some of them actually have perfectly lined up, Sophie, with the questions you've already asked, Jourik. So I think they've already been covered. But one really good one. Sophie, you mentioned in your part at the beginning about kind of Clara being really good with short form content. Why does it work best with shorter form content?
Jourik, shall I leave that for you to answer?
Yes, and I will answer it from a technical point of view because I'm the tech guy, of course. So technically, I wouldn't necessarily say it is better for short form content, but I think from an operational point of view and a process point of view, it makes more sense to get started with short form content. Clara has what it takes to produce really tailored and really targeted output. There's the free prompting, there's of course the RAG, but the nature of Gen AI is that the output is sometimes unpredictable and it's difficult to control. Therefore, if you start off with short form content, you will have more liberty and more freedom to do a thorough, a detailed analysis of the output that Clara produces for you. assess everything, apply some trial and error to make the output better, apply the prompting or change the prompting, apply more reference data, etc. and so on. So if you start off with short form content and you make sure that that works and you have it covered, then you will be able to make informed decisions, well-informed decisions about using it for long form content or not.
Brilliant.
Amazing. Perfect. Thanks, Jourik. Another one is, it was mentioned earlier about kind of some languages being more fit for AI than others. Are you able to give some examples of kind of languages that are a better fit for AI and kind of a little bit of background as to why that is?
Yeah, so it always comes down to the traditional high resource versus low resource language problem in technology. So for certain languages, we have or there is a lot of publicly available data, and then we're talking about the FIX, Western European languages, Eastern European languages, and some Asian languages, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. But of course, if you want to use it for, I don't know, Quechua and very exotic languages, there's no way of identifying whether it's good or bad. Maybe one little anecdote, I actually asked ChatGPT to write a love letter to my wife in Quechua. She's from Bolivia, she speaks Quechua, and I gave it to her very proudly, and she was like, Yuri, come on, what the hell is this? So let's stick with European languages and Asian languages. Let's do proper evaluation of the content and take it from there.
Brilliant.
Amazing, awesome. And then one last one, which is quite kind of Clara specific. If there was a situation where somebody was using Clara and then their brand's style guide changed, is that then a difficult process to sort of retrain Clara, or what would the process be there?
Well,
Mark.
not at all. Not at all. And Mark, if you want to, please take it away.
Yeah, so in this scenario, I think it's just about training and managing the repository. So just refeeding the content, we can change the style guides and re-upload, then re-embed the content in the RAG model. We have real ownership over that, and to be able to update the data as we go. So obviously, that being the source of truth, we have ownership of that, and we can add and remove the data as we go along. So if there are changes to the style guide, then that's a fairly easy fix.
And the team of linguists that would be working on your content would be assessing, so obviously in the process of reviewing and validating content, making sure that the style has been adapted with any updates to the style guide. That would be part of their role, to be looking at the output against the reference material and the inputs for Clara. Yeah. Perfect.
Awesome. There were a couple of other questions that came in, but I think they've all been covered by by Sophie's questions to Jourik. So if they haven't at all, please do feel free to reach out to the details on the screen, and yeah, we'd be very happy to answer in more detail.
Brilliant. Well, I think we've filled the time. Come to the end here. So thank you very much to everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate also the questions that we've come in. If there's any questions, as Dan said, that we haven't been able to answer, we will get back to you with a response to those. Big thank you to Mark and Jourik for Mark for sharing the demo, and Jourik for presenting all that technical information in a very digestible way. So a very, very big thanks to Jourik for that. We've got a slide up, Mark, if you wanted to show that last slide. You've got our contact details there. Please do get in touch if you'd like any more information about Clara, or you'd like to talk about kind of the range of solutions we offer around localization. We'll be back in touch tomorrow with the slides from today, and then we'll also follow up in a week or so with the recording. If anybody needs the recording more urgently, please just let us know and we'll get that over to you. But thank you very much, and hope you all have a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.